moving, and then we'll stop the wheel so we can hear a little bit better, and we'll talk about how the mill works. Notice in the back room back here, you see that large belt that was going through the wall in the room next door? It's powering the line shaft, and you can actually see the wheel turning on that shaft. There's an opening in the siding up here. And then you notice there are flashes going by you in this opening here. And then this is the top of the shaft you saw coming up from below, turning right here in the center of the millstone. And let me stop the wheel and stop over.
William, I'm going to go join the other group.
Okay. All right. The gentleman you see in this photograph here is Mr. John Daniel Lee, and they spell that L-E-A. And he was the miller here from 1898 until 1955. For 57 years he ran this mill. And his father was the miller here before him. And typically that's the way he learned his trade, was from father to son. Now, neither of these men owned the mill, but they were the millers for the owners while they were here. And as far as we know, what Mr. Lee here made was just cornmeal in this mill. And cornmeal is pretty simple. You plant your corn in the spring, you let it grow all summer, you harvest it in the fall, you shelled it, and you brought it here to the mill. And once you got here, the first thing the miller wanted to know is how is he going to get paid? So how do you think they pay a miller? And he took a toll. That's right, he got to keep part of what you brought here as payment. In fact, there's still a law on the books in the state of North Carolina that states that a miller gets to keep 1/8 part of what's brought to the mill. And you can take your toll either in weight or in measure. Mr. Lee obviously liked to weigh his. He's using these scales here. If you like to measure it, then everybody knows what a bushel basket is here. This is a half a peck, 1/8 of that bushel. So that'll be the volume that you got to keep for every bushel that came through the door. And it didn't matter how much corn you brought here, it was 1/8 of what you brought. Now, once you had taken your toll, then over here, the reason we don't come directly from one room to the other is that there's a trap door right here. We can lift up this whole section of flooring, and hanging below the floor is what we call a receiving garner. It's a hopper box, and we pour the corn directly into that garner. It's sort of like the box by the wall over there at the bottom of it. It uses a simple machine, and I guess you all studied simple machines at some point. This one's called an inclined plane. The bottom is slanted downhill, so when you pour the corn in the top of the box, it slides to the bottom. When it reaches the bottom of the box, it encounters a grain elevator, and that's what you saw flashing by you here. These are hollow tubes, and inside that is a continuous cloth belt that circulates around the wheel at the bottom and a wheel at the top. And attached to that belt, we have little metal cups, and some of you may be able to see a metal cup peeking at you there. They're spaced about 16 inches apart, and they get down in that box of corn and lift it upstairs. And when they top over the wheel at the top, they throw the corn into a cleaner. Something similar to what you saw on the porch out there, except it doesn't have a fan associated with it. It's just an inclined box with a wire bottom, so as the corn trickles down, the trash falls out. The clean corn then comes down through the spout that you see hanging from the ceiling here. And these are the millstones that do the work. The millstones will grind that corn into meal, and it exits the little spout right there where we collect it. Now, the way you see the millstones displayed today is not, of course, the way we've used them. I'm inspected by the Department of Agriculture every month because we only grind here once a month. And every mill in North Carolina that makes cornmeal is inspected monthly by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. So every time I grind, I get inspected. So I have to lift them and clean them between grindings. And that's the way you see them displayed. In order to set them up, I use another simple machine. You'll see the screw here on the top of the mechanism. That screw does all the work for me. As I turn that wrench or handle up there, it lifts the stone up off the floor. The stone will then pivot on these pins that are inserted in the side of it. The millstones are always bought from a manufacturer. You didn't make your own millstones. You purchased them. And they always have a hole in the side so you can lift them like that. We call this curved part of it here the bales, just like bales on a bucket. So when you pick the stone up, you can pivot it either up on its edge like it is now or lay it down horizontally, which is what we want to do to install it. Then we can swing it over into place using this wooden crane and lower it down onto that shaft you saw coming up from below that turns. That powers the top stone. That's the one that turns and grinds. We call this one the bed stone, and it doesn't move at all. It's this top one that turns and does the work. So we call that the runner. And once it's installed, then we cover it with this group of equipment right here. This is called a hopper. This is called a horse. and it's sitting on top of a casing. You put this around the stones, and that captures the meal so that it can't escape anywhere except that little spout right there where we collect it. So simply put, you grow your corn, you shell your corn, you bring it here to the miller weighs it and takes his toll, sends it upstairs where it's cleaned, and it comes back down to these millstones, which are made out of granite, and they grind it into cornmeal, and then you can collect it and take it home, cook with it. It's stored a lot better in a meal form than it did in a whole kernel form, because you may have seen corn cribs out in the country. They're basically log cabins with no chinking in between the logs, so they're open and the air can dry the corn a little more, but also the mice and the birds can get in there. So usually in the fall when you harvested your corn, you brought it directly to the mill and you ground it up in the meal, and you tried to guess how much your family was going to eat until next season, and you could store it better that way.